The year was 1843, and the air over the Louisiana riverfront smelled of molasses and gunpowder. The auction bell tolled 3 times before silence fell. On the wooden stage, under the crooked flag of a sunburnt republic, stood a woman heavy with child. Her name, spoken softly by a trembling clerk, was Alara. Her wrists were bound, her face hidden beneath a torn bonnet. She did not cry. She did not beg. She only stared at the crowd, 100 eyes that saw her as property, not as person. When the bidding began, the crowd was restless. $2, someone shouted. $1.50, yelled another. Then came a voice from the back, calm, deliberate. 12 cents. Laughter rippled through the men like fire through dry grass. But when the gavel struck, the laughter died. The man in the black hat, Reverend Silas Wren, stepped forward and handed the coins to the clerk as though performing a holy rite. As Alara was led away, her bare feet leaving smears of dust on the planks, one woman whispered, "The Reverend has bought sin itself." But another, older voice replied, "No, sin bought him long ago." That night, thunder gathered on the horizon, though no rain would come. And as the wagon rolled away, a faint cry echoed across the dock, a sound that was not entirely human. The plantation of Silas Wren stood far beyond the beaten road, surrounded by swampland and silence. The house itself was old, older than anyone remembered, built by a Frenchman who vanished one spring and was never seen again. The path leading to it was lined with dying cypress trees, whose roots jutted like bones from the earth. When Alara arrived, she was not greeted by servants, but by silence. The doors were locked from within, and it took 3 men to pry them open. Dust swirled in the air like ghosts disturbed from prayer. Inside, a single Bible lay open on the floor, its pages blackened by mold. Reverend Wren guided Alara through the halls, murmuring scripture in a voice both kind and cold. "You were brought here for redemption," he told her. "The Lord saw fit to save what man discarded." But his hands trembled when he touched her shoulder, and his eyes darted to her belly as if it contained a prophecy. At dusk, the Reverend locked her in a narrow room facing the east field. From the cracked window she saw shadows move, not men but something taller, slower, gliding through the crops. When she whispered to ask who worked the fields at night, a voice from the darkness answered, "Those who couldn't leave." By the 3rd night, Alara began her duties cleaning the east wing. The air there was suffocating. No wind, no life. The furniture was draped in sheets yellowed with age. Portraits lined the hallway, all depicting the same man. A stern figure with eyes painted black, his hand resting on a Bible. She tried to dust one frame, but the glass was warm to the touch. In the nursery, the cradle still rocked, though no wind stirred it. Beneath the floorboards came a faint tapping, steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat buried in the wood. She leaned close, pressing her ear against the floor. The sound grew louder until she could feel it pulsing in her chest. Then came the whisper, a voice thin and wet calling her name, Alara. She stumbled backward, her breath ragged. When she told Silas, he smiled gently, as if humoring a child. "You hear the past," he said. "It seeks confession." But when she returned to her quarters that night, she found the word confess scratched into her mirror, written backward, as if carved from the other side, and from beneath the floorboards the heartbeat continued, matching the rhythm of her unborn child. Silas spent his nights reading, not scripture, but something older, books with no titles, bound in leather that smelled of salt and iron. He recited passages that sounded like prayers but carried the weight of curses. The word was made flesh. He whispered again and again until the phrase lost meaning. One night he summoned Alara to the chapel. Candles flickered in a circle, their flames bending inward. On the altar lay a basin filled with blackened water. "Your child," he murmured, "is the covenant renewed. The blood that was spilled must be returned. He pressed his palm to her swollen belly and began chanting in Latin. The air thickened. Her vision dimmed. She felt the child stir violently as if trying to claw its way out. When she woke, she was back in her bed. The basin was gone, but the scent of iron lingered. She pulled aside her blanket and gasped. Her stomach was covered in markings. Not bruises, but letters, Latin. The same words Silas had spoken. She tried to wash them away. The water turned red. That night every candle in the house went out, and from the chapel she heard Silas whispering, "The vessel is ready." The labor began under a blood moon. The midwife refused to enter the room after hearing the sounds, deep, guttural, and wrong. "That's not a child," she hissed, backing away. "That's something that remembers before God." Alara screamed until her throat bled. The lamps flickered and burst. Silas stood in the doorway, murmuring psalms that made no sense, his face slick with tears. "Endure," he said. "You were chosen." The air grew heavy. The walls pulsed. The child fought to be born. The moment it came, the house shook. Windows shattered, portraits fell. The cry that followed was not of this world. It vibrated through the bones of everyone on the plantation, even those sleeping in the fields. When dawn came, the room was silent. The bed was soaked in blood, but Alara was gone. Only a single handprint remained, tiny, perfect, pressed against the inside of the window. The glass was cold, but the mark was warm. Reverend Wren fell to his knees and began to pray, but every word that left his mouth came back reversed, like an echo from hell. 3 days after the birth, a foul odor crept through the house. It came from the east wing, from the nursery that had been sealed for years. When Silas forced the door open, the cradle was rocking by itself, slow and deliberate, as if an unseen hand kept it in motion. The sheets inside were stained with blood, yet there was no child, only a lock of black hair tied with twine, and beneath it, a verse scrawled on parchment. "The child is neither yours nor mine, but the earth's to reclaim." The Reverend burned the note, but it refused to catch fire. He buried it in the garden, whispering prayers, but the ground spat it back by morning. The servants spoke in frightened tones. They swore they saw Alara in the fields at night, her belly still swollen, her eyes milky white. Some said she was searching for the cradle. Others said she was guarding it. Silas began to lock every door at dusk. Yet every morning he found muddy footprints leading up the stairs to the nursery, small, bare, and wet. One night he placed a Bible inside the cradle. At dawn the book was gone. In its place lay a single tooth, infant-sized but sharpened like a blade. In the cellar beneath the mansion, Silas kept records, dates, names, transactions. A ledger that chronicled the life and death of every soul ever redeemed on his plantation. He called it the Book of Debt. While he read it one stormy night, he noticed a new entry scrawled in a different hand. The ink was fresh, glistening red. It read, "Alara Wren, paid in full, 12 cents. Balance outstanding, 1 soul." His blood ran cold. He tore out the page, but beneath it another had appeared. It described a birth not yet witnessed, the return of what was bound beneath the cross. Silas began to hear voices in the walls again. They spoke of debts owed not in coin, but in flesh. He tried to pray, but each word made the lamps flicker. That night he dreamt of the auction again, the laughter, the hammer, the woman's eyes. But this time, when he awoke, he was standing outside in the rain, barefoot, holding 12 rusted coins in his hand. They smelled of blood and salt. When he dropped them, they hissed like coals. From the shadows of the barn came a faint cry, the sound of a newborn calling for its mother. The mansion began to change. Doors opened to rooms that hadn't existed before. The floors slanted downward, as if the whole structure were sinking. Mirrors no longer reflected what stood before them. They showed moments that hadn't yet occurred. Silas kneeling, Alara screaming, a child walking backward through fire. The Reverend ordered the servants to tear down the east wing. But when they struck the walls, blood seeped from the cracks. One worker fled screaming that the house was breathing. Another claimed he saw a woman's face, half burned, whispering inside the plaster. Silas prayed over every threshold, but the whispers persisted. The house was not haunted. It was alive. Late one night, Silas followed the sound of crying to the chapel. There upon the altar sat the old cradle. Inside it lay not a child, but a folded shroud. He reached out, trembling, and when he opened it, a rush of cold air extinguished every candle. Written on the fabric in blood were the words, "You built this house on a grave." When dawn came, he found the chapel doors nailed shut from the inside, and his own fingerprints in the wood. For weeks, the slaves refused to work the eastern fields. They said something moved through the corn at night, a figure small and fast, leaving trails of ash behind it. Dogs that ventured near were found dead by morning, their eyes open, their tongues blackened. Silas tried to bless the fields with holy water, but the water hissed when it touched the soil. It smelled of iron. Then one dawn, as fog rolled low over the ground, he saw it. A small shape standing between the rows, motionless, facing him. The child, pale, naked, its eyes the color of milk. He called out, but the child only tilted its head, curious, almost kind. Then it smiled, a toothless, bleeding grin. The corn around it began to bow, as though the earth itself knelt in fear. Silas fled back to the house, his robe torn and muddy. That night he heard tapping on his window. He dared not look, but in the reflection of his glass he saw a small handprint, the same as before. He screamed the Lord's name. The echo that answered was not divine. The town preacher rode out to visit Silas after rumors spread of unnatural happenings. He found the Reverend gaunt, sleepless, muttering verses no scripture ever held. The mansion's windows were blacked out. Inside, every mirror was covered, every cross turned upside down. "God is speaking through the child," Silas whispered. "He was born for this land to cleanse it." But the preacher saw madness in his eyes, or perhaps faith too pure to survive. That night, as the visitor tried to sleep, he heard a Larazai voice echoing from the cellar, a lullaby in a tongue long forgotten. The preacher followed it, candle trembling, until he reached a door sealed with wax and nails. From behind it came a soft cooing, then a wet laugh. The candle died. When he finally fled the house at dawn, his hair had turned white. He told the townsfolk that Silas had made a covenant with something ancient, something older than the church itself. But when they returned days later, the mansion stood empty. The doors swung open, the nursery quiet. Only the cradle remained, gently rocking, with a single coin resting where the child should have been. When the townsfolk declared the plantation cursed, they sealed the gates and left it to rot. But one woman returned, Mrs. Agnes Wren, Silas's estranged sister, a widow draped in black. She came not for love of kin, but to claim what the Reverend had left behind. She found the mansion silent, choked by vines. Dust hung in the air like ash. As she walked through the parlor, she heard a faint lullaby, the same melody Silas's mother had sung decades earlier. The sound drew her toward the east wing, to the cradle still rocking, though no wind stirred it. When she leaned close, a breath touched her cheek, warm, wet, alive. She recoiled, but a whisper followed. "You shouldn't have come back." That night she dreamt of Alara, chained and pale, standing before the house. The slave woman's eyes were gone, her belly hollow, her mouth sewn shut. Yet her voice filled the widow's mind. "The dead isn't his anymore. It's yours now." At dawn, Agnes found 12 coins neatly arranged on her pillow. One was still damp with blood. Searching for answers, Agnes explored the chapel, forcing open the nailed doors. Inside, the air stank of mildew and something older: salt, decay, and incense. The altar cloth was stiff with dried blood. Beneath it lay a basin carved from black stone. In its center floated a withered umbilical cord, preserved in dark brine. Carved into the basin's rim were Latin words: "The water remembers." Agnes poured the brine out, but when it touched the floor, it sizzled. From the vapor rose a child's cry, faint, echoing. She stumbled backward, but the voice followed her down the hall, whispering, "You cannot unmake a baptism." Later, she found Silas's journals hidden behind a false wall in the study. His final entry read, "The covenant demanded blood pure of birth and sin alike. She was both. I only gave what was promised." Agnes closed the book and stared toward the chapel. The sound of dripping water grew louder. When she returned, the basin was full again, the brine darker, thicker. Floating in it now was a small coin, marked with her initials. The 12 coins began appearing everywhere: beneath her bed, inside her shoes, even in her food. No matter where she threw them, they returned by morning. Each bore a different face, but none were human. She brought them to town, hoping to destroy them. The blacksmith placed one on the anvil and struck it with his hammer. The tool shattered on impact. The coin remained untouched, glowing faintly. He refused to handle the rest. That night, Agnes heard footsteps pacing her room. She rose with a candle and saw wet footprints leading from her door to the cradle. Inside lay all 12 coins, arranged in a circle around a patch of dirt. Then, slowly, something began pushing through the soil. A tiny hand, bloodless and trembling. It opened its palm as if waiting for her touch. Agnes screamed and fled, but by dawn, the cradle was empty again. Only the coins remained, now fused together into a single disc. On its surface, engraved in blood, were the words, "Balance due." Driven by terror and curiosity, Agnes unearthed the plantation's history. The original owner, Jean Duray, had purchased the land from a Choctaw elder in 1791. The elder's final warning was written in the deed itself: "The dead below are not yours to keep." She followed old maps into the swamp beyond the fields, where she found sunken gravestones, dozens, perhaps hundreds, half swallowed by mud. None bore names, only symbols, spirals, hands, and eyes carved in circles. As she dug deeper, she uncovered bones bound together with rope. Infants, women, men. The air turned cold, humming with voices that did not speak but vibrated through her skull. Then she found it. A wooden cross split down the center, its surface blackened by fire. Beneath it lay a book sealed in wax. When she pried it open, she found not scripture but a single page of Silas's handwriting. The house was never built upon faith. It was built to contain what faith refused to name. Thunder cracked overhead, and the swamp began to tremble. Something beneath the soil stirred, something that had waited too long. That night the river beside the plantation overflowed, though no rain had fallen. The current ran backward, dragging reeds and fish toward the house. Agnes watched from the balcony as shapes moved within the water, faces countless and shifting, like memories drowning and resurfacing. One face rose higher than the rest, Ilara's. Her eyes were open now, burning white. She whispered through the flood, her voice both many and one. "The child waits. The price remains," Agnes screamed, but water burst through the windows, filling the parlor. She tried to swim, but unseen hands clutched her ankles, pulling her down. Beneath the surface, she saw the cradle sinking slowly, still rocking. Inside it, a child's form took shape, pale, perfect, and smiling. When she awoke hours later, on the riverbank, the mansion stood dry and silent. untouched by flood. But her reflection in the water was not her own. Alara's face stared back, lips mouthing the same 3 words over and over. Paid in full. The coins were gone, the cradle empty. But her belly had begun to swell. The sky turned red for 7 days. Birds flew backward. Livestock refused to eat. The townsfolk whispered that the river near Wren's plantation was boiling. When a child from the nearby parish went missing, the sheriff led a search, but the tracks ended at the gates of the mansion. The air there smelled of copper and rain. Inside, Agnes sat at the dining table, pale and feverish. She didn't recognize herself anymore. Her belly swelled, though she hadn't eaten in days. She heard the voice of Silas in every room, whispering verses from the ledger he once wrote. At night, candles burned without flame. The portrait of Silas in the hall began to smile. Its eyes glistened with life. She tried to cover it, but the fabric clung to the canvas like skin. Then came the rain, thick, black, falling in drops that steamed when they hit the ground. Through the storm, she saw shapes approaching from the fields, dozens of figures all barefoot, moving in silence. When lightning struck, she saw their faces, every slave who had ever died on that land, each one missing its eyes. They stopped at the porch and bowed. Then they began to sing, the same lullaby Alara had hummed before she vanished. The following morning, Agnes awoke to find the book of debt open on her chest. Every page was filled with names written in blood, not of the dead, but of the living. Her name was last, followed by a date, tonight. She tried to burn the book, but when she struck a match, the flame bent away. The letters on the page began to move, slithering into new shapes, forming a single sentence. The debt must be born again. Agnes screamed and hurled it across the room. The book struck the wall and burst open, spilling black smoke that twisted into forms, hands, mouths, eyes. They circled her, whispering, "You are her. She is you." She fell to her knees, clutching her stomach as it convulsed. The pain came in waves, sharper than childbirth, deeper than hunger. She crawled to the mirror and saw Alara's face again, older now, crying. The reflection spoke, "You carry the price, give it form." Agnes pressed her hands to her belly and felt movement. Not a child, but many. Small hearts beating, overlapping, singing in unison the same lullaby from the fields. At midnight the house awoke. Doors opened by themselves. The chapel bells tolled, though no wind moved. The cradle in the nursery glowed faintly, as though lit from within. Agnes crawled toward it, trembling, her body failing beneath the weight of whatever grew inside her. She screamed for help, but only the portraits answered, their mouths gaping, their eyes weeping tar. The sound of crying filled the room. Not hers, not the child's, but the house itself, moaning in labor. When the birth came, it was not blood that poured from her, but water, thick, black, and boiling. From it rose a shape small as an infant, but wrong. Its skin shimmered like oil, its eyes colorless. The child smiled. And when it opened its mouth, her voice came out. Paid in full, the walls bled. The cradle cracked. Every candle in the house flared and went out. When light returned, the child was gone. Only Agnes remained, lying in the cradle's splinters, humming softly to nothing. Weeks later, men from the parish came to investigate. They found the plantation still and empty. The furniture decayed, the chapel door hanging from its hinges. In the nursery, they discovered a woman's body, pale, dried, her hands clutching her belly. Her face was peaceful, almost smiling. One man swore he saw her move. Another claimed to hear a heartbeat in the walls. They sealed the house again, boarding every window. But before they left, one of them noticed something strange. The cradle was whole once more. Inside it lay 12 coins, shining, freshly minted. When they returned to town, the men refused to speak of what they saw. One by one they went mad. Some drowned themselves in the river. Others vanished in their sleep. The sheriff kept the coins locked in his office, but by morning, they were gone. Only a message was scratched into the floorboards. Debt never dies. Decades passed. The plantation fell into ruin, swallowed by moss and silence. Yet on certain nights, travelers swore they saw a light in the upper window, the faint glow of a cradle rocking by itself. In 1912, a church committee attempted to build over the site. Their first sermon ended abruptly when the floorboards split, releasing a stench of rot and river water. The preacher fell to his knees, clutching his chest, whispering words no one understood. From beneath the floor, a voice rose. Soft, feminine, ageless. It spoke through the cracks in the earth. You cannot buy what was never yours. The church was abandoned within a month. And still, every decade, someone new disappears there. A traveler, a child, a wanderer seeking salvation. Locals say the debt continues, that the coins reappear, passing from hand to hand. A curse traded for faith, and if you ever find one dull and rusted, stamped with the faint image of a woman's face and a single word beneath it, paid, do not pick it up, for the soil still remembers the price of 12 cents.